I can't remember more precisely when it was, whether or not it was with Henrietta Leachy, who is a part of us as well, or has been a part of us, her publication on the poetics and politics of display, that was a part of that book by Stuart Hall on representation, that we came to a kind of different kind of criticality around what it means to exhibit. Or was it at that moment of those 3 spectacular books done through Ivan Karp and Corey and that group, Museum and Communities, the first one, and ended with the third one, Museum Frictions, in which Siraj was an important part of that set of conversations, when that very nature of thinking that political in how we engage with museums emerged as part of our practice. And there was another book called The Politics of Display. And yet, a decade and a half after some of these publications, we are still embroiled in a conversation about the politics of display. This time differently. This time more precisely with the question of the colonial at the heart of the conversation. And I would move further to suggest that this time more precisely with the question of race and racism and racialization at the center of the conversation of the politics of display. What then are the ethical horizons that we need to address if we are to take seriously what colonialism has done in shaping the museological understandings, in shaping our museums as space? What does it mean to take power seriously? And whose power do we take seriously? The power of interpretation, the power of consent, and whose consent do we look for? Today, we're going to explore these horizons, these ethical and political and power horizons, to try and come to terms with what it might mean to display colonial collections in museums. And I say to display because while very often we think of pressing matter or we think of our conversations as just simply about restitution, this project, like a lot of us in this room, recognize that at stake in these conversations is not simply about returning objects. We will still have objects here. And even if they all were to go back in a horizon 500 years from now, within that period, we will still have the questions at play of how to display and what to display, when and with whose permissions. And the day will end with our keynote lecture from Siraj, who is going to trouble us a little bit. And I'm happy to see Siraj's title, Museums and Social Activism, because in a certain sense, one of the things that I think, if he was a part of the projects with Ivan Karp and Corey Kratz over a decade and a half ago, then I think it shows how the questions that were being raised then are still pertinent questions, but the conjuncture, the very moment in which we are now, are different moments when we have to possibly find different answers. This also comes at a time of wars and raging wars in the world. So one of the questions that I hope that we will attend to is not to sidestep our relationships as museum with the question of violence, but to realize that exhibiting can be a very violent, can participate in violence, but perhaps can also offer possibilities for us to imagine different kind of presents and futures. Thank you. Welcome.